Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News. It is Monday, January 19th, around 3:30 in the afternoon. Brutally cold at 52 degrees, which is bad for us, but nowhere near as bad as it is for the poor, beleaguered people living in the city of Minneapolis. And we're going to talk about a few of the things that are occurring. First and foremost, I guess, is going to be the fantasy of what people think the First Amendment is versus what the reality is, and why it's going to become crystal clear to everybody what the difference is in Minneapolis. So, the goal is going to be to establish that Minneapolis is just not another protest story, that it's actually mythology and great power. So, what we are watching in Minneapolis isn't just activism, it's a collision between three things: what people believe the Constitution allows, what the law actually says it allows, and what the federal government will tolerate. The catalyst was the shooting of that woman. Okay. I don't care about her. I don't want to hear her name. I'm not going to bring it up. The accelerant was the ideology that has been driving these idiots to do all this unlawful stuff in towns and cities across the United States. And the fuse was a misunderstanding about the First Amendment, which jerk offs like Don Lemon have constantly just said the term, not known what it means. And when I hear as of 3:32 today, I believe they're looking at Don Lemon because there's probably a situation there where either he was in on the planning of the attack against that church, maybe he instigated it, but he is not any, he'll no longer be considered, shouldn't be considered a member of the free press. He has totally gone native, not that he hadn't years ago. But this image, if you see him in the church with all these frightened people and these maniacs, and he's thinking he's slick, hopefully he has a drug addiction problem or a mental health issue. Otherwise, he is just one of the worst people on the planet. So that's what's going on with that. You can shout almost anything you want, okay? But you cannot do almost anything you want. And that distinction may decide how many people walk away from this little party alive. And I say that because there's also video of some gentleman with a beard, of course, with a fucking, I don't know, some kind of ironic big jacket on, carrying a long gun. When, of course, he's in the Air Force because he has a hand in his pockets. So that means if ICE were to move up, he's going to turn around one-handed with that rifle because he can't get his hand out of his pocket, and somebody is going to shoot the shit out of him. He will be unalived. He will be on the ground unalived, and the poor guy who pulled the trigger is going to have to put up with all this nonsense because this guy subconsciously suicided by cop. Okay, so enough of that. It's just, as you know, it piles up. The shit is piling up so high, you need wings to stay above it, as they would tell you. So the key idea here is that activist culture has been taught a fantasy version of the civil rights because they won't open a book on their own, right? You can protest anywhere. It's basically what you had with 3 to 5 year old children that acted out. You can protest anywhere. They're telling you can do this. Protest anywhere, interrupt anything, trespass and obstruct, confront, intimidate. There are no consequences. And since you are doing it and you're in the right, then you're immune to any kind of consequences. So they have been pushed along this route, other than just being weak brained, by a very supportive group of socialists that are in power in a number of these governments. So you had the defund the police, which is selective non-enforcement of law, sympathetic media framing. Oh, look at these heroes. They're out there keeping illegal child molesters. You saw the video today where the guy rolls the window down from ICE and says, you know, we're trying to pick up a child molester. And they're like, we don't care. So you don't care that there's a child molester in your community as long as you stop this guy from doing something. So You know, people in the old days would say, well, I hope your kid gets raped. And you'd say, damn, that's pretty cold. You can see where they're coming from, right? So you do have this media pushing them along, positive reinforcement for negative deeds, activist NGO training, which they are now getting training from more and more people. This is these select cadre types that I've been talking about for the last 10 to 20 years that are in there, know what to do, know how to street fight, know how to lock things up. And every year you go to a class, the class will get progressively more violent. And we are seeing that, right? So if this is all going on and they've decided that LA wasn't going their way because LA, as a newer city, wider streets, not as easy for them to choke out with the amount of people they have because they've been losing people in the LA battle, and it's not Seattle because that's sort of become normative. That's like the third year of World War One. What they have done here in Minneapolis as the demonstration case, they invaded this church the other day because one of the ICE officials is supposedly a pastor there. Was wondering what that was all about, but supposedly the story is he is a pastor at that church that Don Lemon and the rest of his happy assholes went in, busted in, and started to do whatever they did there. The activists sincerely believe, and I'm serious, they sincerely believe this is constitutionally protected and that they're allowed to do it. And we're just being, meaning the rest of society is just being mean guys. We're just being mean. Turn your music off at 9:30 at night, kind of mean, right? They believe that they're constitutionally protected for what they're doing. And they are escalating towards more and more confrontations. Whereas the police in general are standing back and not helping the federal agents, whereas it makes the federal agents' job. And this is like we're a broken record. The federal agents would work with the local cops to block like the end of the streets or whatever, keep the local busybodies from getting in the way. They would do their warrant, get their people, throw them in the car. The police would move the barricades and everybody goes on their way. Well, they don't have that anymore. And they have people that are working in the dispatch and are calling up and telling you where the day's hits are. That is something that DHS and whoever else has to send a little mongoose in there and catch all those people. And each one of them, especially where there's been an incident of injury or anything like that, has to be set there and held accountable for it over and above what they should get, which is fired and put on a list. They should be getting prosecuted. If somebody gave up that list, which I'm pretty sure they did the day that the woman was shot, she also should become a co-defendant in the wrongful death case because she put that into, or he or she put that into action. That's where we're at, right? So what you've had happen here is, like I said before, we have many videos on this. These people believe that they have total immunity to behave the way they do. And when you give people total immunity to behave the way they do, they will behave the way they do. So the core legal distinction here, I know we do this a lot, so I'm trying not to do it too often, but it's like nobody watches anything. I'm not saying that we're doing the greatest job on the planet because we don't reach very many people, a couple of thousand on a good week, right? But there are real big websites that don't even talk about this stuff, right? Because why would they? Because that would get you wondering what the hell's going on. The big sites that are theoretically pro-Republican or pro-conservative, they're trying to get you to think that we're going to lose the midterm elections, which you're not going to lose every time somebody breaks into a church, beats up an old lady, and screams free illegal child molesters. That doesn't happen. It's called, they used to call it, what was it, the silent majority? Silent majority's back, right? So the First Amendment protects speech from government censorship. It does not erase other people's rights. So I'll give you three ways to look at that. Trespass in private property. Don't go in my church, my funerals, my homes, my workplace, and start yelling shit. You're not protected. Obstruction in public safety. Get off stop blocking the highway, stop blocking the emergency vehicles. You're not protected there either. Interference with worship, which is, I believe one of the charges they're going to hit Don Lemon and the rest of them with is a civil rights violation because you interfered with a house of worship. It's a uniquely protected category. And as I said, it can bring up federal civil rights charges. That's why those idiots used to always go out in the middle of the street and pray to Mecca because, first of all, they're not that bright. They don't understand their own religion. They don't realize the cleanliness part of the whole thing. And they're doing it so if you touch them, they could get you for interfering with their federal civil rights. They're not smart, but they're not stupid. Same shit applies to these guys. So the punchline of this whole thing is the right to protest is not the right to invade every piece of property you see and just do what you feel like doing. So what we have here now is a series of dangers that we've talked about and been trying to find ways to bring to people's attention. People with bad legal information, and once again, none of us are lawyers. Saying it again, none of us are lawyers as we're going to say something about law. But people with bad legal information enter situations where they provoke armed law enforcement or confront federal agents when they escalate physical confrontation. And then some innocent bystanders have to absorb the fallout. So the tragedy wouldn't be that these guys get arrested. The tragedy is somebody's kid gets hit by a car during a highway blockade, pit maneuver, whatever. The only honor student in the community, remember that kid? He gets killed because of this assholery. And of course, we are talking institutional danger, which is the bigger point. The city of Minneapolis leadership is ideologically opposed to not only federal law enforcement, but the federal government. They do not want to recognize the fact that the federal government supremacy clauses and such apply to them. Because as you can see from what they're finding out in Minnesota, the governor himself and the mayor of Minneapolis are probably up to their eyeballs in crooked shit. That's the legal term, crooked shit. As much of it as they could stick up to their eyeballs. And who financed what, where, and when? So Walz is going to be what? The Fuhrer? And this is Berlin, and he's going to burn it all down around him because I'll tell you what, if there are any documents out there with his signature or his whatever in his phone, same with the mayor that says, stop and fight these cops, it's over for him. He's going to go to jail, especially if it occurred prior to the shooting of that woman. You can make it happen. And if not, perhaps he needs to be sued individually out of that 5,000 square foot house that he got on a teacher's salary, somehow in between that and his 20 trips to China. Okay. In there also is all these NGOs, which are run by the Somalis, all these NGOs that are run by God knows who else. They're inflaming the confrontation. They have money they can kick into this stuff. You have the Minnesota National Guard, whose reliability, if it was me and I was the president, I would federalize them and stand them down. Walz has stood up a certain amount of these units because I guess he figures he's going to play some kind of gun game with us, meaning the United States. Seeing how the rest of the Minnesotans are acting, I wouldn't trust the Minnesota National Guard any further than I could throw them. So the president should, if when he declares that the situation is out of control there, he can federalize them and tell them leave all their stuff and go back to their houses. Lock up the armories, put federal agents on the armories so they can't get next to the weapons. Not that you're going to have that situation, but that signals that we don't trust you people at all. Because when you're talking about stuff and guys are talking about illegal orders all the time, anything coming out of Walz's mouth, talking to the National Guard about what he needs them to do with federal agents is all unlawful orders. And as of now, the Guard is reacting positively to what Walz is saying. So therefore, you have to assume that the Guard's command structure is compromised. There may be a couple good guys, but why take the chance? Pray for the best, prepare for the worst. Okay? So you have that going on there. And so what is this what we're talking about here? We got 1,500 troops coming in from out of nowhere. I think they're from Alaska, so I guess they have no friends at all in the area. And That's set to roll whenever it has to go. So where does this go if this myth of we can do whatever we want to do and freedom, First Amendment means free to do whatever I feel like doing, regardless of if it hurts you people or not. And that's going to collide with troops that are going to be operating under federal rules of engagement and not the Twitter fantasies. Someone's going to pop off, possibly. See, now you have to say to yourself, most if you're saying that these insurgencies, socialists, or have a commander, let's say, and you usually don't want to squander your troops unless you really have to. That's not how socialism works. Socialism grinds down the average soldier. If you ever saw that movie, Enemy at the Gates, the beginning is in Stalingrad. One guy has a rifle, one guy has bullets. When the one guy's killed, you pick up the other thing. That's still the mentality of how socialists fight a fight. That's how they fight an insurgency. But they are getting to the point now where, as you're rooting out all their money sources and you're rooting out their connections and this, that, and the other thing, people are being brought back into the game who thought they were either out of the game or they would never be called on to be in it. Okay, so you'll see more outbreaks in the East Coast. Something will happen in New York to try to take the federal resolve away from it. The whole point here from the socialist side is they have to show that they can break the will of the President of the United States. If they can break him and force him out of somewhere, they think that they can win. They think that's going to give them the midterms, and that will allow them then to prosecute Donald Trump for the last 2 years of his presidency, and then after he's out of office, find a way to imprison and or kill him so that the rest of his years are spent either out of the country and on the run or in an American jail. And that is no joke. I do not do extremist shit, but there is no other way for them to be gambling at this point, not with the way they're rolling up these different groups. Venezuela, if you notice, after that went down, a lot of people got Jesus real quick, you know? So that's what we have going on here. The miscalculation has gone to the socialists because it's a narcissism that runs through this whole organization. These aren't regular socialists. This is an American socialist phenomenon that fed off of a lot of European stuff. But since they had already infiltrated the government at key levels, they didn't have those fights that, let's say, Red Army faction had over in Germany, right? They didn't have to try to kill the chancellor or kill somebody in the Christian Democrats, you know, because those jobs were already taken by fellow travelers. You were just there as a socialist in the United States in these last decade to be the threat that they needed to change the way the laws work and to challenge what laws really mean. The reason that they use the First Amendment all the time is so that it becomes totally unacceptable to use, like the word Nazi. Like everybody's a Nazi, right? Everything is not protected under the First Amendment. Everybody is not a Nazi. They have to understand that, but they can't because that's the mantra. It goes all the way back in the United States. If somebody who's still relevant was how they made the death penalty irrelevant. It had nothing to do with justice and mercy. It was taking an extreme in their minds, but not extreme that they wouldn't do it, extreme that it would be inflicted upon them and other traitors. So they had to get it out of the way. They need people to question the laws of the country, especially long held laws of the country. The laws going back 200 years are the ones we must question. Things in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution are things we must question as a socialist being a shitbag trying to overthrow the United States government. And that's where we stand, and that's what's going on in Minnesota. So the quicker everybody goes and gets a social studies book and learns what they're supposed to be doing and just calls these guys all the time. You don't have to go online and say anything, you know. We go online off and on, myself and some of the other guys. Let you just say stupid shit because there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. I know there's that Andrew, whatever his name is, guy who he will debate them and all this kind of shit. This is not the Oxford Student Union. It has gone way beyond that because most of those guys, if it was a real world situation that were having that debate with that Andrew, you know what I'm talking about, black hair, a beard, smoked cigarettes, they would have just shot him in the head. About 3 minutes into that, when he was being clever, they would have just shot him in the head or punched him or inflicted violence upon him because they're too stupid to hang with him in the real world. That's why they have their people on television that are clever. That's why they have stupid shows like The View where they attack some poor person who comes on that has to promote a movie and they get all over him. They look like an asshole because that's the only way these people feel comfortable is that they're part of a larger, meaner group than they are in real life. 90% of them, you tie them to a chair, they're going to be shitting before you even pull out the pliers. Okay? So I would say this is like a defining moment. I know I've gone on too long. I'm sorry. But like you said, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with this. We're not touching into a lot of the core things. As I said, we've done videos. Go back and look at them if you like. www.southfloridaconservative.com. We have some stuff on Substack. Our written work is actually more involved. So it's very hard for me to bang through this stuff in 25 minutes. This didn't happen in 25 minutes. It's happened over almost 30 years. It started happening to us during World War II, and it has not let up since. But we are at a head where we can finally beat this shit down. And if you are have young children, maybe your children will grow up free of it. You know, maybe they won't have to do God knows what, worried about bombs every time they go out to a store, worried about all this other stupid shit, worried about somebody wanting to cut parts of their body off because they said the wrong thing at an interview. It's a dark time in America, but we are on the better side of it. Let's put it that way. There's some dark shit going on, but there always was. It's just more out in the open because the mass media, of course, wants you to think that you should surrender. They want you to think that everything is horrible. I look out the window here. Granted, I live in an area that's theoretically whatever it is. High, it's not high end, but we're something. They say they are, that we are, but I know better. The fact is you can go to a lot of places in the world, you can go and see stuff 50 times worse. The people that are out there fighting for the illegals, 9 times out of 10, they're fighting for people who want those same illegals because they want slaves. You know, the agricultural people in California, those jerk offs out in, what is it, Wyoming, the one who's a Republican who's going to vote against Trump, because they aren't paying these people anything. They don't want to follow the rules that we have in place because it's something they should have worked out years ago and they never did. The cost to bring agricultural laborers in. But the thing is, you want, and it's a whole other, I'm sorry, it's a whole other topic. But the fact is, do you want people to live on welfare or do you want people to work? That's where you're at on a lot of this stuff. And these people that are fighting for the people that are working, they themselves are not working. Not because they can't, not like if you said, I have something, whatever it is, right? I've been in a car accident, I've been in whatever, lost use of my legs or something, whatever you've got. And if you're on a disability, that's one thing. If you're on welfare because you don't fucking want to go to work, that's a different story. If you want to go to work and you're in a community like Minneapolis and those, and I'll bet you if you went around there before this started, the job possibilities were probably bullshit. Bullshit and bullshit's brother. You were not able to go and say, I want to go do this, or I want to go do that, or maybe I want to learn a trade. Maybe I could join a union. I know not everybody loves them, but the fact is, you want to see yourself get paid for not having a high school education, be good with your hands and get in one of those. Why weren't we pushing that? Because then we'd have to pay somebody who's a citizen $30 an hour what I can get an illegal to do for 10, right? There's a lot that goes on in this, but the way of life of the people that are exploiting all of us is the way that it's been going, which is the socialist way. Now, if you don't want that, do what you got to do. Do I tell you to go out and buy guns and all that stuff? No, either in a community that needs them or doesn't need them. Don't be an asshole. Don't go to a section where you don't need to be. If they're protesting, don't be around it. Counter protest doesn't work because 9 times out of 10, if you saw the Battle of Seattle, the pro-America guys are the ones that got arrested. They let the Antifa guys go because they know who they wanted. They wanted people who protected America off the field, and they got them. So anyway, we're getting too far field here on this. Sorry about that, but yeah, Don Lemon's a piece of shit. Hopefully he goes to jail. Probably won't, but you know what? Somebody really ought to look at him. Those type of people, as the president had said about this issue with media, if you're going to be a propaganda organ, if you're going to be a mouth for the socialists, you don't get the free pass anymore. I think the stuff that we do, if you've seen any of it in the written stuff, we're pretty fair. We have all the citations 9 times out of 10, and you make up your own mind. Some of this stuff has been popular, some hasn't been popular. But that's what happens in a free society. You don't come and set fire to our office because of that, right? I shouldn't have to carry a gun to go to the restaurant up the street because somebody recognized me and wants to kill me over it. Not with a circulation of a couple of thousand, Christ. So anyway, that's all we have for now. Questions, comments, etc. Get a hold of us. We were going to do some things if we get somebody that has a couple of interesting topics that you see and we have not covered, or they're not being covered correctly on regular media. Let us know. We'll try to get that done. Okay? Otherwise, have a good day and talk to you later.